Hey everybody, Carl Hughes from Draft.dev here to talk about technical thought leadership. Now, first of all, thought leadership is kind of a loaded term, and I don't love it because it gets sort of misconstrued by a lot of people. In general, when people talk about thought leadership, they're talking about this kind of unique perspective. I call it like your worldview type content, where you, as a leader in some capacity, you convey unique experience and knowledge you have out to your readers to maybe convince them of something, to be persuasive, to get them interested in your product, maybe to get followers for a new movement or ideal. There's a lot of reasons that people write thought leadership. But the term is pretty vague, and marketers often misuse it. I hear a lot of times marketers refer to pieces of content that are basically just like high-level overviews of a topic as thought leadership, when I would say that it's not necessarily every piece of high-level content is thought leadership content. So that aside, thought leadership is important kind of writing to do. And if you are writing for with any goal in mind and you are someone who has a unique experience or leadership in a space, then thought leadership type writing can be really good to get your ideas out there. And it's one of the most difficult types of writing to pull off because it requires a nuanced and highly experienced viewpoint. But at the same time, they can also be really, really powerful. They can go viral. They can get shared a lot. It's really good from a straight up from a marketing standpoint. So let's talk about thought leadership. Let's get some in this video, the short video that accompanies an article I wrote this week. I'm going to talk about some examples of thought leadership, especially technical thought leadership. At Draft.dev, we work exclusively with companies that want to reach software engineers. And while we don't actually write thought leadership content for our clients, a lot of our clients are doing this in addition to the kind of writing we do at Draft.dev. So I have a fair bit of experience myself in this area. I was an engineering manager, CTO over the last 10 years at startups. And so a lot of the writing that I did at those points was thought leadership type writing. And for me, what was really important was a lot of times I didn't have like a goal of like, let's get people behind me. It was more about building a personal brand. And that's a good reason to do thought leadership as well. But in some cases I did, I was writing for companies or writing for clients at different points that wanted me to write on a certain topic that I actually did agree with their viewpoint and feel strongly about. I think with thought leadership, you can't just make it up as you go. You actually have to share and believe what you're saying. It can't be something that you sort of like convince yourself of. It's possible you could fake it, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as strong as if you actually hold a belief strongly and you say it that way. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into some examples of thought leadership writing. So you get kind of an idea of the range of thought leadership, sort of some categories for it in case you're coming up with ideas and you're trying to think of how a piece might fit into one of those categories. And then I'm going to offer some tips for thought leadership, because writing this kind of technical thought leadership is a little trickier than straight up tutorials. It's a lot trickier than comparisons or maybe just technical overviews of a topic. And it takes some unique experience that may not be something you can easily replicate or fake. So first of all, let's get into some examples. Okay. This first one I have is called "The Bulk of Software Engineering is Just Plumbing." And it's an article that I wrote 3 years ago or so about how no-code and low-code tools are helping software developers build more software without actually writing as much code. And I took a strong stance on a controversial issue, and that's a really common pattern for writing good thought leadership content. So in this case, it was just kind of like not a rant necessarily, but just a push that I've noticed with a lot of software engineers at startups who try to overbuild things because they want to be unique in a way that's probably not necessary. And so I was sort of like, let's get back to basics here and just admit that a lot of what we're doing is connecting together open source and paid APIs in a way that is unique and novel to just solve a basic business problem. And that's what a lot of software engineering is. So this is one way you can do it. You can take a controversial stand on an issue and you can share that in a compelling way. And this article got some virality behind it. It's hit the front page of Hacker News before. It's been shared a lot on Reddit and other social media platforms in the past. I think it's made a couple rounds because people land on both sides of this issue. Some think very strongly against what I'm saying here and it's sort of they're almost offended by it. Others, on the other hand, agree with me and see a lot of what I'm saying in their experience as well. Another way you can build technical thought leadership content is sharing your unique point of view. So this is another piece I wrote a couple years ago called A Day in the Life of an Engineering Manager. And I had literally tracked my time for probably a year or two before I did this piece. And I ended up creating kind of a breakdown of how I spent my time. And that was really helpful, I think, for a lot of people who were maybe considering a move into management or new to management or had gotten into management and were wondering, am I actually doing the right things? And so it was my personal perspective, but I think it also resonated with a lot of engineers who were in similar positions as myself. And so while this one is not so much a convince you to do something specific, it does show my sort of experience in the space. It shows my, I guess, authority would be one way to put it. And ultimately, I think it's a pretty interesting, compelling read that, managers can't spend all their time out there writing code. And I kind of ended off with some tips that I found for being an engineering manager. So this is another way to come up with things, is just basically take something that you have done that very few other people have really done or written about and write your unique perspective on it. The last kind of thought leadership that's really common is predicting the future. And these are sort of common with maybe Fortune, 100 or 500 level CEOs, but you also see them in small startups where the founders kind of opine about the way that they think technology will change things in the future. And in this case, I was talking about the future of hosting with edge computing. Now, I actually did some interesting stuff in this one. I had my own opinions, but I also interviewed a lot of people for this article and ended up pulling together their thoughts as well. So I kind of gave an overview of edge hosting and then dive into a bunch of the challenges and why I think it's going to be a big deal in the future. I had some quotes from some people in the edge hosting space. And ultimately, I think this is a good argument that kind of says that, if you're not paying attention to edge hosting as a way to build and deploy your applications, you might want to start. And that's kind of the point of this article. It's not a huge takeaway, like nothing to buy or anything, but it's just more about like being aware of new technology that's available. Okay, so those are 3 examples of thought leadership, technical thought leadership specifically, that are aimed at engineers, that kind of showcase the writer's expertise. In this case, these were mine, but I obviously have plenty of other examples by other writers who do great jobs with this too. So if you want to read those, there's more in the blog post that accompanies this. You can read at the link down below. Now, the last bit here, what I want to finish off with are some tips for writing thought leadership well, because again, it's a tricky kind of writing. So first and foremost, experience is key. You have to actually know what you're talking about if you're going to write this kind of thought leadership content. And I don't just mean you read all the books about it. Like personal experience, a deep, unique, up-to-date knowledge is honestly what makes these pieces stand out, I think. And I also think that you have to be aware of what else is being published and written on the topic at any given time, because that context, the like neighborhood of ideas that are surrounding yours, will really help either bolster your arguments or help other people tear them down. And so you need to kind of be able to know what else has been said so you can talk about it, refute it, and be aware of all the context your readers probably have. Next, I think you've got to support a single thesis rather than trying to come up with, like a lot of times bad thought leadership ends up being this just big, long, rambling rant about all the different problems or things that the writer thinks are annoying or whatever. And those really don't land nearly as well as a piece of thought leadership that has a single, very well defined purpose that every piece of evidence kind of points back towards. And the reason I think a lot of people write these big, long, rambling ones is that they don't maybe have a good organizational system. So having an outline is really important. I think that's actually something I talk about a lot in writing better technical content. Another article I wrote that'll be down in the links below. Having organization for your piece is really critical, but it's especially critical in thought leadership where you really need to pick one idea, centralize all your arguments around it, and just go with that. Don't try to make it 6 things at once. Also, you've got to supplement your opinions. Now, while your personal experience is really great and important, having some quotes, having some data, having something that makes it a little more than pure conjecture, also really important and really going to raise your credibility profile with readers. So some ways I've done this in the past, a lot of times I interview people for thought leadership pieces, or at least will send some emails to people I know to get some quotes or perspectives, or maybe their articles they've read or they've written or read on this topic. So I have some more, some more supplements to my opinions. It's also really important that you supplement your own opinions and conclusions with refuting yourself. So what I mean by this is, let's say I'm making this argument for the future of web or future of edge hosting, right? That's fine, but at some point in the article, what I need to say are there are some weaknesses or limitations to edge hosting, because it's not going to be perceived as very fair or very reliable information if I'm only giving one side of the argument, right? So I need to build up the other argument and then figure out good ways to refute those points, or say, yeah, these are limitations, but they're not insurmountable, or they will go away in the future, something like that. Last but not least, you really need to have a strong conclusion for thought leadership content, whether that's a call to action to get people to sign up for some kind of, newsletter, mailing list. That's fine. That's like, maybe you got people fired up enough to do that, or a more interesting call to action, like donating to a cause, or signing up to write their own or writing their own piece to reply to yours or something like that. All good options. The more strongly held your beliefs are, the probably stronger these conclusions are going to be. But at the same time, don't just let it trail off. Don't let your arguments just trail off into nothing. Kind of wrap the whole thing up with a summary. And then at the end of the day, this is all about experience, time, and practice. So like all writing, you kind of need to do it to get better at it, and you're not going to be great the first few times you do it. So get used to that. Internalize the fact that that's okay, and go ahead and start doing it. Give thought leadership writing a chance. You don't have to be a leader in a job title sense of the word. I've seen plenty of great thought leadership by software engineers who were just hands-on engineers who have 5-10 years of experience and have just noticed really interesting technical observations when working with teams or when working with code or what have you. I mean, there's a lot of different levels of thought leadership. You don't have to be out there just spouting it off about the future of the world. It can be a lot lower level, a lot more specific to your day-to-day experience. So get started. If you have questions about writing good thought leadership, feel free to leave me a comment or replies below, or you can find me on Twitter. I'll have my link below. It's at Carl L. Hughes. Looking forward to hearing from you there.